The civil war in Bosnia did not go by older standards. There were three sides as opposed to two, and the Croats switched alliances halfway through. From 1992 to 1995, Bosnia was dominated by a civil war. The United Nations tried to unite the country and end the war, but their attempt largely failed. Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia, became a war zone subject to airstrikes and tank use. It is worth noting that only a few years before the war, it was an Olympic site. It was also the city where Archduke Ferdinand of Austria-Hungary was assassinated to begin the First World War. The UN and NATO used both passive and aggressive tactics in their reaction to the war. With both diplomacy and airstrikes, the UN and NATO had little to no effect in ending the conflict early on. Before the war, the UN restricted imported weapons into Bosnia. Unfortunately, this gave the Serbs an advantage because they had easier access to weapons already in the country, and the bombing had negative effects on the civilian population. All three sides for the past 20 years have been unable to reach any compromise, so the country is paralyzed. They can't agree on the past and they can't agree on the present, never mind the future. This quote presents the complexity of the Bosnian crisis and underscores why the UN wasn't able to be as effective as intended. When the fighting was finally stopped with the Dayton Accords, the UN still kept troops in Bosnia. The occupation of Bosnia with UN troops included using US troops as well. It cost the US a lot of money, and it only succeeded in quieting the Muslim section as Serbian and Croatian voters began supporting militant groups all over again in 2000. Among other organizations, the United Nations Transitional Administration for Eastern Slavonia, Baranja, and Western Sirmium was tasked with uniting the warring factions and their homelands. This quote explains why UN soldiers proved helpful. Some politicians thought an extended military presence would not benefit Bosnia. Among them was Bosniak President Alija Izetbegovic. Reminiscent of Germany's harsh reparations after World War I, the UN excluded Serbia by requiring many steps and trials throughout the reapplication process, yet they admitted Croatia and Bosnia among other Balkan countries without as many steps. Ratko Mladic and Radovan Kradzik were eventually arrested and prosecuted by the UN for war crimes and violations. These crimes included a civilian sniping campaign, genocide, and other crimes against humanity. After continued reports of war crimes, the UN Security Council established a process to assess and deal punishments for war crimes specifically related to the Bosnian Civil War and the former Yugoslavia. But for many Bosnian families, it was too late. This is a map of the UN safe zones. The green shows areas occupied by UN troops of specific nationalities. Since infantry proved to be the most successful, the UN could have ended the war much sooner if they deployed troops earlier. While some progress has been made, things have yet to return to normal for the inhabitants of Bosnia-Herzegovina. Serbs and Muslims are still reluctant to mingle, the economy is still in poor shape, and foreign troops still occupy the country. The UN's work in Bosnia is not over.